The late afternoon sun hung low over the Arizona desert, spreading a warm orange glow across the dry land. Miles of open space stretched in every direction, broken only by tall cactus plants and thin strips of road that led travelers from one small town to another. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that made even the sound of wind feel louder. On this lonely stretch of road, Daniel Reeves drove his old pickup truck at an easy pace, heading back to his ranch after buying supplies in town. He liked driving home at this time of day. The fading light always reminded him of peaceful sunsets he used to watch with his late wife. Those memories were bittersweet now, but they still comforted him. As he drove, Daniel noticed something unusual ahead, a lone figure walking slowly along the side of the road. Travelers were rare out here, especially ones on foot. He slowed his truck, curious but cautious, and saw that the figure was a woman, wrapped in a thin, worn shawl that was clearly not enough to fight the evening chill. She walked with a tired heaviness, as if she had been moving for far too long. Daniel pulled over a short distance ahead. He watched in the mirror as the woman approached, her steps careful. When she arrived at the passenger side window, he lowered it. Up close, he could see she was young but looked older than her years, her face marked by sun, wind, and exhaustion. Yet there was something gentle about her eyes, something steady and strong. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Daniel asked politely. The woman took a moment before speaking, as though choosing her words with care. "I am fine," she said softly. "My name is Ayana. I am just looking for a place to rest until morning." Her voice carried a quiet dignity, even in her tired state. She did not beg, did not demand. She simply asked. Daniel noticed the small bundle she carried, mostly clothing, neatly folded though old. She held it close, almost protectively. Everything about her suggested she had been traveling for many days, maybe weeks. "We're a long way from any shelter," Daniel told her gently. "Where are you headed?" "Anywhere safe," she replied, not looking him directly in the eyes. "I do not wish to trouble anyone. If you allow it, I can wash your clothes, or do any small work, in return for shelter for the night." Her offer surprised him. Most people would ask for help outright. But here she was, offering to work simply for a warm place. Daniel felt something shift inside him, respect, and a quiet concern. "You don't have to do that," he said kindly. "It's getting cold. You should not be out here walking." Ayana hesitated. She looked down at her hands, then back up with a humble expression. "I cannot accept kindness without giving something back. My elders taught me to stand with honor, even in need." Daniel admired her honesty. He stepped out of the truck and opened the passenger door for her. "At least come sit for a moment. Rest your feet." She nodded gratefully and climbed in, placing her bundle gently on her lap. When Daniel closed the door, he noticed how small and fragile she looked inside the big truck. But her posture remained straight, almost proud. He returned to the driver's seat and started the engine, letting the heater warm the cabin. Ayana rubbed her hands together slowly, enjoying the warmth as if she had not felt it in days. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Where did you come from?" She took a breath before answering. "I am Apache. I lived with my family near the mountains. But after my grandmother passed, everything changed. I left to find work, to find a place where I could stay for a while. But it has not been easy." Her words were simple, but Daniel could sense a deeper story beneath them. Loss, change, maybe even heartbreak. She was not someone running away. She was someone searching. He handed her a bottle of water from the glove compartment. She accepted it with both hands, as if it were something precious, and drank slowly. He noticed how carefully she moved, like someone who had learned not to waste or take anything for granted. As they continued toward the ranch, Daniel kept stealing glances at her. The sun dipped a little lower, and the temperature dropped. He reached behind his seat and pulled out a thick wool blanket he always kept in the truck. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "You look cold." Ayana shook her head lightly. "I do not want to take something that you might need." Quote, "It's fine," he assured her. Really. She accepted the blanket, but instead of wrapping herself immediately, she held it with quiet appreciation, as though feeling its warmth through her hands first. Daniel could tell she was someone who valued even the smallest kindness. "You don't owe me anything," he added. "You don't have to wash clothes or work. Just rest." Her eyes softened, touched by his words, but her voice remained careful. "Where I come from, we believe everything has balance. If someone gives, I must give something in return. Not because I am forced, but because it feels right." Daniel understood that. He had lived his whole life by similar values, helping neighbors, fixing fences, sharing food during hard winters. Maybe that was why her presence felt strangely familiar, even though they had just met. They drove in silence for a while, the kind that was peaceful rather than uncomfortable. The sky shifted to deeper shades of orange and purple. Ayanna watched it through the window, her expression thoughtful, almost nostalgic. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. "It is," Daniel agreed. "Quiet, too. People say it feels empty, but I think open space can heal the mind." She nodded. "My grandmother used to say the land listens even when people don't. When you walk far enough, it takes your worries from you." Daniel smiled faintly. "Your grandmother sounded wise." "She was," Ayanna answered, though her voice carried a hint of sadness. "I miss her." The truck rolled over the small hill that revealed Daniel's ranch in the distance, a simple place with a wooden house, a barn, and a wide stretch of land. The porch lights were already on, glowing gently in the approaching evening. Ayanna straightened in her seat, quietly studying the ranch as they approached. To her, it likely looked like safety, a place where the world finally stopped moving. Daniel noticed her expression. "You can stay for the night," he assured her. "There's a spare room in the house." She looked at him with gratitude she struggled to express. "I will not cause trouble." "I'm not worried about trouble," he replied. "Just glad I passed by when I did." As they neared the house, Daniel realized something. Meeting her didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like the beginning of something, maybe a new chapter in his life. Or maybe just a small act of kindness that would stay with him for years. Ayanna held the blanket close as the truck came to a stop. She didn't speak, but her quiet smile told Daniel everything. She finally felt safe. The evening breeze grew cooler as Daniel and Ayanna stepped out of the truck. The desert sky was turning a soft purple, with the first stars appearing like tiny dots of light. Ayanna held the blanket gently around her shoulders, feeling warmth she had not felt in many nights. She moved slowly, unsure if she should walk ahead or wait for Daniel to guide her. Daniel closed the truck door and motioned toward the porch. "Come on inside," he said kindly. "You must be tired." Ayanna nodded, though part of her still hesitated. She had met kind people before, but trust was something she had learned to give cautiously. Still, there was something steady and honest about Daniel, something that made her feel she could walk forward without fear. As they approached the house, the warm yellow light coming from the windows made the wooden walls look welcoming. The porch boards creaked softly under their feet. Daniel opened the front door and stepped aside so she could enter first. Inside, the house smelled faintly of fresh bread, coffee, and something familiar like warmth and safety. The living room was small but tidy, with shelves filled with old books, family photographs, and small pieces of pottery. Ayanna's eyes paused on a picture of a smiling woman. She didn't ask, but she could tell the woman was someone important in Daniel's life. "Make yourself comfortable," Daniel said, placing his hat on a hook near the door. "I'll put on some tea." Ayanna stood near the doorway, unsure where to sit. She didn't want to step anywhere without permission. Daniel noticed her uncertainty and smiled softly. "You can sit wherever you like. You're welcome here." She nodded and chose a small wooden chair near the window. As she sat, she touched the blanket again. Smoothing the fabric with her fingers, it reminded her of a blanket her grandmother used to weave, thick, simple, full of care. From the kitchen, she heard the clinking of cups and running water. The sound was comforting, almost rhythmic. It had been a long time since she had been in a home where someone prepared something for her. When Daniel returned with 2 steaming cups, he placed one gently in front of her. "It's mint tea," he said. "Good for cold nights." Ayana wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, after a pause, she added softly, "I can still wash clothes tomorrow. Or help with anything you need." Daniel shook his head with a gentle smile. "You don't have to do anything. Offering help shows your good heart. But kindness doesn't always need a payment." She lowered her eyes. "Where I come from, we show respect by giving something back, and that respect is enough," Daniel replied. "Just rest. That's all I ask." Ayana looked at him, surprised by how easily he spoke with understanding. Most people she had met during her travels either ignored her or treated her like a burden, but Daniel saw her as a person, someone with dignity and a story, not just someone seeking shelter. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, creating a gentle humming sound around the house. Ayana listened to it for a moment, letting her mind settle. Daniel sat across from her. "If you don't mind me asking, how long have you been traveling?" She thought for a moment. "Many weeks. After my grandmother passed, I stayed for a while in the mountains, but the home we lived in needed repairs. I could not do alone. I searched for work in nearby towns, but it was difficult. Sometimes people did not want someone they did not know. Other times, there simply was no work." Daniel nodded, understanding more than she realized. "That must have been hard." She gave a small shrug. "The land teaches patience. I try to follow its lessons." Her words carried quiet wisdom, making Daniel feel a deeper respect for her. He could tell she had endured much, yet none of it had taken away her gentle nature. After they finished their tea, Daniel stood. "Let me show you the room where you can sleep." He led her down a short hallway to a small but cozy room. The bed was neatly made with clean sheets and a soft quilt. A single lamp glowed on the bedside table, casting warm light across the room. Ayana stepped inside slowly, almost afraid to touch anything. "This is too much," she whispered. "I do not need a whole room. I can sleep near the fire, or outside." "No," Daniel said gently, shaking his head. "This room is for guests. You are my guest tonight." Her eyes softened with gratitude, and she placed her hand on the quilt, testing its softness. It felt comfortable, almost unreal. "I will only stay one night," she said quietly, though her voice wavered slightly. "Tomorrow, I can continue my journey." Daniel nodded, even though he hoped she would give herself more time to rest. "You can stay as long as you need, but the choice is yours." She looked at him for a moment, searching his face to make sure he meant what he said. When she saw sincerity in his eyes, she felt something loosen in her chest, a tightness she had carried for far too long. "Thank you," she said. "You have shown me more kindness than many." "I'm glad I could help," he replied. "If you need anything, I'll be just down the hall." Ayana nodded, and Daniel left the room quietly, closing the door halfway to give her space. She sat on the edge of the bed, letting out a slow breath. The room felt peaceful, and for the first time in many nights, she felt she might actually sleep without fear of the cold or the uncertainty of the next day. She placed her small bundle of clothes on a chair beside the bed and unfolded the blanket Daniel had given her. She traced her fingers along its edges, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. It wasn't just a blanket, it was a sign that someone still believed in giving without expecting anything back. Ayana lay down, pulling the quilt gently over herself. Her eyes grew heavy almost immediately. The comfort of the bed, the warmth of the room, and the quiet safety around her created a calm she had not felt in a long time. Before drifting to sleep, she whispered into the quiet air, as if speaking to her grandmother's spirit, "I am safe tonight." Down the hallway, Daniel sat in the living room for a while, thinking about the unexpected meeting. He wondered where Ayana's path would lead, and whether this night would be just a moment in her journey or the beginning of something more meaningful. He didn't know why, but he felt grateful, too grateful, that he had been driving along that lonely road at just the right time. The house grew quiet as the night deepened, with only the soft hum of the desert wind outside. Inside, two people, strangers just hours before, rested under the same roof, each finding a small piece of peace in the presence of the other. The next morning arrived softly. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains in Ayana's room, warming the air with a golden glow. She opened her eyes slowly, unsure for a moment where she was. For weeks, she had woken in different places under trees, near old bus stations, or in quiet corners of empty fields. But today, she was in a warm bed, wrapped in safety. It felt unfamiliar, yet comforting. She sat up, touching the quilt with gentle fingers. A quiet sense of peace filled her chest. For the first time in a long while, she had slept without worry. She whispered a small thank you to the morning light, before standing and folding the blanket neatly at the edge of the bed. When she stepped into the hallway, a pleasant smell reached her: fresh coffee and warm bread. Daniel was in the kitchen, moving around with calm, steady motions. He noticed her and smiled warmly. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." Ayana gave a small nod. "Very well. Thank you for everything." "I only made simple breakfast," he said, gesturing toward the table. "Please, sit and eat." She hesitated for a moment, still unsure if she was taking too much, but Daniel's kindness felt sincere, so she quietly took a seat. The bread was still warm, and the steam from the cup of tea curled gently upward. As they ate, the house felt peaceful, like two calm rivers flowing side by side. There was no rush, no pressure, just quiet comfort. After a few minutes, Daniel asked gently, "If you don't mind sharing, what brought you so far from home?" Ayana took a slow breath. She had carried her story inside for so long that speaking about it felt both heavy and relieving. "After my grandmother passed," she began softly, "the home we shared felt empty. She taught me everything: our stories, our traditions, the songs of our people. Without her, the place felt different. Things that it." Daniel nodded, listening carefully. "I stayed as long as I could," she continued. "But the roof needed repair. The garden needed care. I tried to manage, but I could not keep up. And the winters are very cold in the mountains. I knew I had to look for a way to support myself." "Did you have other family?" Daniel asked gently. "Some," she replied, "but they lived far, and I did not want to be a burden. I believed I should learn to stand on my own." Daniel admired that. "That takes strength." Ayana smiled faintly. "Strength and patience. The land teaches both." Her words carried quiet wisdom, and Daniel found himself wanting to hear more. Her voice seemed to hold stories from another time, another world. Ayana looked down at her hands. "Traveling was not always easy. Some places welcomed me, and some did not. But I always tried to give something in return. Work, help, anything." "That sounds exhausting," Daniel said. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I believed I would find a place eventually. A place where kindness existed." She looked up, meeting his eyes for a brief second. "Like this place." Daniel felt a warmth in his chest at her words. "I'm glad you feel safe here." Ayana lowered her eyes again. "Safety is rare. But last night, I felt it." The simple honesty in her voice touched Daniel. He realized he wanted her to stay longer. Not because she needed help, but because her presence brought something gentle into the house, something he hadn't felt in years. After breakfast, Daniel asked, "Would you like to see the ranch? It's a quiet morning. Maybe you'd enjoy the fresh air." Ayana agreed with a small smile. They stepped outside together, the sun now higher in the sky. The ranch spread out in wide open spaces, fields of dry grass, sturdy fences. A few horses resting near the barn. The air carried the soft scent of earth and hay. Ayana walked slowly, taking in everything with thoughtful eyes. "It's beautiful here," she said. "The land feels calm." "It's been in my family for generations," Daniel said. "My father raised me here. Then I raised this place with my wife." Ayana's gaze softened. "The woman in the photograph?" Daniel nodded quietly. "Her name was Sarah. She had the brightest laugh you could ever imagine. She passed a few years ago." Ayana stopped walking, her expression gentle. "I'm sorry," Losing someone close leaves a quiet space that stays for a long time. Daniel looked at her with surprise. It was exactly how he had felt, but he had never found the right words for it. Yet she expressed it with simple truth. "You understand," he said quietly. She nodded. "Loss is a teacher. A hard one, but a teacher. It shows us what matters." They continued walking. Ayanna paused near a fence, gently touching the wood with her fingers. "This place has good energy. It feels like a home full of memories." Daniel smiled softly. "Yes. And sometimes, memories are what keep the place alive." She looked out across the field, the wind brushing lightly through her hair. For a moment, she looked peaceful, like she belonged in that very moment, on that very land. Daniel found himself watching her, noticing how naturally she connected with the environment. She seemed to understand things without needing explanations. As they walked back to the house, Ayanna noticed a few loose boards on the porch railing. Without waiting, she touched them gently and said, "Your home has stood strong for many years. It might need a little care, but it still holds its strength." Daniel chuckled softly. "You sound like Sarah. She used to say the same thing whenever something needed fixing." Ayanna looked down, almost shyly. "Your wife had good eyes." "We both did," Daniel said, then quickly added, "I mean, she understood the heart of things." Ayanna nodded with a small smile. Inside the house again, Ayanna asked quietly, "Would you mind if I helped today?" "Not because you asked, but because it feels right." Daniel thought about it for a moment. He didn't want her to feel obligated, but he also understood her need to give back. "Only if you want to," he said. "I do," she replied simply. Together, they spent the morning doing small chores. Ayanna swept the porch with calm movements, humming softly under her breath. Daniel repaired a few old tools but found himself watching her now and then, not out of curiosity, but out of quiet admiration. There was a peaceful rhythm between them. They didn't need many words. Their presence beside each other felt natural, like they had known each other longer than a single night. As the afternoon sun warmed the fields, Ayanna brought Daniel a glass of cool water. He accepted it with a nod of thanks. "You work hard," she said. "So do you," Daniel replied. She glanced at him thoughtfully. "Working together makes things lighter." Daniel paused, hearing the simple truth in her words. "It does," he agreed. They sat for a moment on the porch steps, letting the warm breeze brush past them. The sky stretched far and wide, quiet and endless. Ayanna looked out across the land. "This place, it feels like it listens." Daniel tilted his head, curious. "Listens?" "Yes," she said softly. "Some places hold silence. Others hold peace. This one holds both." Her words stayed with him long after she fell quiet. Neither of them knew it yet, but this simple day made of shared stories, gentle moments, and quiet understanding was the beginning of a bond that would shape both of their lives more deeply than they could imagine. The next few days passed quietly, each one settling softly into the next. Ayanna remained on the ranch, though she never assumed she would stay. Every morning, she rose early, folding her blankets neatly and stepping outside before sunrise. Daniel often found her standing near the fence line, watching the sky brighten into soft pink colors. She would greet the day with calm eyes, as if speaking silently to the land itself. Daniel had grown used to seeing her around the ranch. She never waited to be told what needed doing. She simply observed and stepped in wherever help was needed, moving with grace and intention. If a bucket was slightly out of place, she straightened it. If the garden soil looked dry, she brought water. She even found a small tear in one of Daniel's work gloves and repaired it with thread she carried in her bundle. Daniel appreciated her help, but what he valued more was the peace she brought. The house felt more alive with Ayanna's presence. Her soft humming whenever she worked filled the rooms with gentle warmth. One morning, Daniel decided they should tend to the animals together. "Would you like to help with the horses today?" he asked. Ayanna's eyes lit up with quiet curiosity. "I would like that," she said. They walked to the barn side by side. The horses were calm and friendly, their warm breath forming small clouds in the cool morning air. Ayanna approached them slowly, placing her hand gently on their necks. She whispered soft words Daniel didn't fully understand. But the horses leaned closer to her, as if drawn to her steady spirit. "You have a way with them," Daniel said with surprise. She smiled. "Animals feel what we do not speak." Together, they brushed the horses, filled their water troughs, and cleaned the stalls. Even simple tasks felt meaningful when shared. Daniel found himself looking forward to each moment, though he didn't say it out loud. As afternoon approached, dark clouds began to gather in the distance. The wind shifted, growing cooler and heavier. Daniel looked up at the sky thoughtfully. "A storm is coming," he said. "A strong one." Ayanna studied the clouds carefully. "We should prepare," she agreed. They spent the next hour securing anything that could blow away tools, empty barrels, loose boards. Ayanna moved quickly, tying knots with practiced hands. Daniel worked beside her, impressed by how efficiently she handled everything. The sky darkened faster than expected. The first rumble of thunder echoed across the open land, followed by a strong gust of wind. The storm was arriving sooner than either of them had hoped. "We should check the barn once more," Daniel said. They reached the barn just as the wind picked up. Dust swirled through the air, and the sound of distant thunder grew louder. The horses inside were restless, pacing and whinnying softly. Ayanna placed her hands on one of the horses' necks and whispered calming words. Slowly, their movements eased. "You're amazing with them," Daniel told her, shaking his head in gentle disbelief. She smiled shyly. "They only need reassurance." Suddenly, the wind shifted sharply, pushing open the barn door with force. Daniel moved quickly to close it, but the gust was strong. Ayanna stepped in beside him, helping push the heavy door shut. Together, they secured the latch, their hands brushing briefly against each other. Neither spoke, but the moment carried a soft weight, like a shared breath. Rain began to fall, tapping against the barn roof. The soft sound soon turned into a steady rhythm. Daniel looked around the barn. One of the old boards along the side wall shook with the wind. "That board needs fixing," he said. "It might come loose tonight." "I can help," Ayanna said immediately. He hesitated. "It's not safe in this weather." "One?" She held his gaze gently. "Two people can do it faster than one." Daniel considered this and nodded. They stepped outside together, pulling their jackets tighter as the wind brushed against them. The rain was cool but not harsh yet. They worked side by side, using nails and a hammer to secure the loose board. Ayanna held the wood steady while Daniel hammered. The storm made it challenging, but they managed to keep their movements steady. At one moment, the wind blew hard enough that Ayanna had to brace her hand against Daniel's arm to stay balanced. He steadied her without a word. Their eyes met briefly, sharing a calm understanding that didn't need explanation. When the board was secure, they hurried back to the porch. Rain had started falling faster, forming small puddles across the ground. Once under the shelter of the porch, Ayanna brushed the wet strands of hair from her face. She laughed quietly. A soft, warm sound that surprised even her. Daniel found himself smiling in return. "You handled that storm better than most ranchers I know," he said. She shrugged. "The land teaches us to adapt." Inside the house, they dried off and warmed their hands near the small heater Daniel kept in the living room. The rain soon grew heavier, tapping urgently against the windows. The storm was strong, but the house felt safe. Ayanna sat on the edge of a chair, watching the rain with thoughtful eyes. "Storms remind us how small we are," she said softly. "But they also remind us how strong we can be." Daniel glanced at her. "I think you're stronger than you realize." She lowered her gaze, touched by his words. "Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is just continuing." In Aventiu, the storm lasted into the evening. As night fell, the wind howled outside, and occasional flashes of lightning lit the sky. Daniel checked every window and door to be sure everything was secure. Ayanna followed him, helping wherever she could. At one point, a strong gust shook the house, causing a branch to tap loudly against the side wall. Ayanna flinched slightly, but Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said. "The house has been through worse." His touch was gentle, steady. She looked up at him, seeing not just kindness, but genuine care in his eyes, something she had not seen in a long time. When they returned to the living room, Daniel set a pot of warm soup on the table. "It's not much," he said, "but it will help warm us up." Ayanna shook her head. "It's more than enough." They ate quietly while the storm continued outside. Every now and then, Ayanna glanced around the room. The wooden shelves, the soft lighting, the memories that lived within the walls. She felt a sense of belonging she had never expected to feel here. After they finished eating, Ayanna stood and said softly, "If you want, I can check the windows again." Daniel smiled. "You've done enough for today. Please, rest." "But I want to help," she insisted gently. He looked at her for a moment, then nodded in understanding. "All right, we'll check them together." Together they checked every room, every latch, every space. And every step they took felt more connected than the last. By the time they finished, the storm had begun to weaken. The wind softened, the rain lightened. The house settled back into its calm state. Daniel and Ayanna stood near the hallway, listening to the fading sound of the storm. It felt like a small victory, one they had faced side by side. Ayanna looked at Daniel with quiet gratitude. "Working with you today. It felt right." Daniel's eyes softened. "I'm glad you were here. I don't know what I would have done without your help." She shook her head. "You would have managed. But it is easier when two people face the day together." Daniel smiled gently. "Yes, it is." As they stood there, the house filled with peaceful silence, broken only by the soft patter of the last raindrops. Neither said it aloud, but they both knew something important had shifted between them. They were no longer just a traveler and a rancher. They were becoming something more, two lives quietly beginning to understand each other. The morning after the storm felt new, as if the world had been washed clean overnight. Soft sunlight streamed across the ranch, touching every corner of the land with a warm, golden light. Drops of water hung from the leaves and fences like tiny crystals, shining in the early rays. The air smelled fresh like earth, rain, and quiet hope. Ayanna stepped outside, just as the sun lifted above the horizon. She wrapped Daniel's wool blanket around her shoulders, though the air was no longer cold. She simply liked the comfort it brought her. Standing on the porch, she closed her eyes and breathed in deeply. For the first time in a long while, she felt rested not just in her body, but in her heart. Daniel walked out a moment later, holding 2 warm mugs of tea. "Morning," he said, his voice gentle. Ayanna opened her eyes and smiled softly. "Good morning." He handed her a mug. "I made your favorite mint tea." She accepted it with both hands, as she always did. "Thank you. You remember everything." Daniel laughed quietly. "I just pay attention." They stood side by side, looking out at the fields. The horses grazed peacefully. The birds hopped along the wet ground, and the gentle wind carried a calming whisper. Everything felt calm. Everything felt right. After a long moment, Ayanna spoke in a soft voice. "The storm last night. It reminded me of something my grandmother used to say." "What did she say?" Daniel asked with interest. "She said storms come to test what is weak and to show what is strong." Daniel nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in her words. "And what do you think the storm showed?" "Trying." Ayanna looked out across the land, her eyes thoughtful. "It showed that your home is strong. And it showed that maybe I am stronger than I thought." Daniel smiled at her. "You are." Ayanna held the warm cup close. "And you," she added quietly, You face hard days with a steady heart. He was touched by her words but didn't know how to respond at first. He simply stood there, letting her words settle warmly inside him. After finishing their tea, they walked toward the barn together. The sun had dried most of the ground, and small patches of wildflowers peeked through the wet earth. Ayanna stopped to touch one gently, admiring how something so delicate could survive a storm. Inside the barn, everything was in order. The horses were calm, and the tools were right where they had left them. Ayanna moved through the space with familiarity now, as if she had lived there for years, not days. Daniel watched her for a moment before speaking. "You've become part of this place," he said softly. Ayanna paused, her hand resting on a wooden beam. She looked around with warm eyes. "I feel that, too." They finished their chores and returned to the porch. The afternoon sun had grown brighter, casting clear shadows across the yard. Ayanna stood quietly, as if gathering her thoughts. Finally, she turned to Daniel. "I think it is time for me to continue my journey." Daniel felt something inside him tighten, not in a painful way, but in a way that made him realize how much her presence had begun to mean to him. He hid his surprise with a calm expression. "If that's what you feel is right." She nodded slowly. "I never meant to stay long. I only asked for one night of shelter. You gave me more than that." Daniel looked into her eyes. "You don't have to leave, Ayanna. Not unless you truly want to." Her gaze softened, filled with both gratitude and uncertainty. "Your kindness has been a blessing. But I do not want to take more than I deserve." "You haven't taken anything," Daniel said firmly. "If anything, you've given more than you know." She glanced down, thoughtful. "What have I given?" He took a breath, letting the truth form gently. "Peace," he said. "Company. A sense of life in this house again. I didn't realize how quiet things had become until you arrived." Ayanna's heart warmed at his words, but she remained unsure. "I am only one traveler, Daniel. I do not want my presence to burden your life." Daniel shook his head with a gentle smile. "You could never be a burden." The wind shifted softly between them, brushing past like a reminder of all the moments they had shared, mending, working, laughing, facing the storm. Ayanna looked out at the fields one more time. The land stretched wide and peaceful. Daniel's home felt like a place she could finally breathe, but she also felt the old habit inside her, the feeling that she should keep moving, keep searching. Daniel stepped inside the house for a moment and returned with the wool blanket she had used since the first night. He placed it around her shoulders carefully, the way one might place something treasured. "Ayanna," he said gently, "you don't have to go, but if you choose to, take this blanket. It's yours." She looked down at the blanket, surprised. "Daniel, this belongs to you." "It belongs to someone who needs warmth," he said simply. "And it suits you better than it ever suited me." Ayanna touched the blanket with tender fingers. She remembered the night he had handed it to her with the words, "You don't owe me anything." The same kindness was in his eyes now. Daniel continued, his voice quiet but sincere. "Stay as long as you need. A day. A week. Longer. This place is your shelter too." Ayanna felt her throat tighten with emotion she didn't often show. She wasn't used to people giving without expecting anything in return. She wasn't used to someone caring simply because they cared. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "I do not want to take your space." He met her gaze steadily. "You're not taking anything. You're filling a space that needed someone." The truth of his words warmed her like sunlight after rain. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the gentle feeling settle inside her. When she opened them again, she looked out over the ranch, the quiet fields, the strong fences, the birds flying low over the grass. It all felt familiar now. Safe. Welcoming. She turned back to Daniel. "Then, I will stay. Not because I must, but because my heart feels calm here." Daniel exhaled softly, as if a worry he never admitted had finally lifted. "Then I'm glad," he said, smiling. Ayana returned the smile, small but full of warmth. I will work with you, help where I can. You already do, Daniel said, and you always will. They stood beside each other on the porch as the sun rose higher, lighting the world around them. The birds sang gently. The land breathed quietly. Everything felt like the beginning of something new. Ayana wrapped the blanket closer around her shoulders. My grandmother used to say, she said softly, that when two paths cross with kindness, they become one path for a while. Sometimes for much longer than we expect. Daniel nodded. Maybe she was right. Ayana looked at him, her eyes bright with a calm certainty. I think she was. Silence settled between them, not heavy, but peaceful, like the final note of a beautiful song. Two people who had once been strangers now stood side by side, knowing that their lives had gently intertwined, not through grand events or dramatic moments, but through small acts of kindness, shared work, and honest hearts. As the day brightened, Ayana stepped off the porch and looked toward the open ranch. Daniel joined her. Together, they walked forward, not as a traveler and a host, but as two souls who had found comfort in each other's presence. And though neither said the words aloud, both of them felt it. This was not an ending. This was a beginning.